Yeah, TCU's got a really outstanding team. I think it's no different. It's the same as the University of Georgia or University of Alabama, one of the top college football programs. Hey, listen, everybody doesn't always get it right, right? I mean, like, that's what Brandon Staley, who is the head coach of the Los Angeles Chargers, had to say after drafting a couple of players from TCU, a couple of good players, actually. I want to make sure. I can't remember all of the guys that they drafted, but that doesn't really matter. What we're talking about right now is this bizarre quote. And it's curious to always hear coaches in the moment talk about who they've drafted and so forth, but there's no scenario where TCU is in the same universe as Georgia. And if the 65-7 win over the Horned Frogs doesn't prove that, I'm not really sure what does. TCU had a very good season. They are not Alabama and Georgia. I think we know. I mean, we got a book about it that's out there. Hey, listen, if you want to get this book, you can sign up for our newsletter. I'm giving away 5 of them for free. It's the only link that I've got down below. But one of the you got to do it by May 15th, so do it now. One of I'll tell you the story of that night for me. And I know every single moment in games is not every single game, excuse me, is not um, if Georgia plays that game against TCU 10 times, do they lose it? I don't think they do. I mean, I just don't. I don't think they lose to TCU no matter what. I think so. Heading into the college football playoff, the consensus was TCU is the worst team. Well, that turned out not to be true. They were at least the third best team of the four because they were better than Michigan. Um, would they win that game out of 10 times? How many would they win it? Well, we know they win it once. We know they won it one time, but I don't think they'd have beaten Ohio State, but I don't think they'd certainly lose to Ohio State the whole time. I think just with the way that we saw what Georgia did to them, I think maybe 1 out of 10 times Georgia would lose to TCU. And, would TCU beat Alabama? Probably not, almost certainly not. Maybe they beat them 2 out of 10, something like that. The difference right now between Georgia and everybody else, and then Georgia and Alabama, and then everybody else, and then Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State, and Michigan, and everybody else. I think it's relatively noticeable. I think the closer you get to the top of the list right now, which is the Dogs, the further it gets away from everybody else. There is a jumble at the top. I think that LSU and Florida State are ascending. I think that Clemson is descending. I don't know who else would be in that group, but LSU descended pretty quick themselves, so it can happen. But um, you know, TCU had a great run, and it just they're just not like those other two programs. And the fact of the matter is, most teams are not. Most programs are not like Georgia and Alabama. Again, I talk about Georgia and Bama so much. I mean, it really is competitive. It really is repetitive, and I get so annoyed that so much of the focus sometimes only is on certain teams. But the fact of the matter is that, and the bulk of this is Alabama, but it's not exclusively Alabama. But the fact of the matter is that since '09, you've had either Georgia or Bama in the '09, 11, 12, uh, 15, 16, 17, both of them, 18, 20, 21, both of them, and 22 national championship games. I mean, no, no, I mean, Clemson and Alabama would have more than that. Um, I'm pretty sure, playing in the national championship because Clemson's played in it 2 more times than Georgia. No, they played it in 15, 16, 15, 16, 18, 19. So they played it one more time than Georgia. Um, but there's not a lot of programs that can combine to be deadlier than Georgia and Alabama. And I think that with where things are positioned right now, um, it looks like well, the team that could be descending is Alabama. Now, I don't know how much I buy that. I don't know how much I buy that, but it's a discussion point that is sort of fascinating for an NFL head coach to make. I mean, there's no scenario where there's no scenario where Texas Christian is like Alabama and Georgia. The scenario is that TCU has played for a national championship more recently than Alabama has. That doesn't mean that that they're the same as Alabama. I mean, that would suggest that well, they're the only ones who's played for it recently compared to everybody else. But I mean, that would be like saying in 19 that LSU was a better program than Alabama. Well, that's not true. That was not true at the time, and it's still not true. I do think that LSU, Florida State, and LSU both are the trajectory of both is good. And then what's so curious about that, I'll admit, what is so curious about that is that, you know, LSU didn't even finish dual top 15s. I mean, they were number 16 in the AP top 25. So that loss, those back-to-back losses to Georgia, and there's nothing wrong with losing to Georgia in 2022. I'm not sure that there's going to be much wrong with losing to them in 2023. But in the case of LSU, they did lose Texas A&M. That's a problem for some of us. Like, would LSU have beaten Clemson? I mean, probably. I don't know that that's a certainty by any stretch. But then you look at Florida State. I mean, this is the first time in a very long time that the Noles have been the highest ranked team to come out of the ACC to end the year. And, you know, not just that, but the way that and they weren't playing the same type of opponent, but the way they ended their season last year, that was pretty rough for Clemson. That said, I mean, you can't compare playing Tennessee to playing Oklahoma. Oklahoma sucks. And I wonder if all those OU fans who were so in their feelings a year ago about what I said about Brent Venables are still in their feelings. I mean, y'all realize you're coming into the league, right? I mean, you get what's coming, right? Like, oh, I don't even know, but uh, I I I I think NFL coaches will do their best to justify, the decisions that have been made, usually above them at the general manager level and sometimes the ownership level. And the Chargers have done a good job. And this is the same coach. I mean, he's getting blistered, probably unfairly a little bit. He's just talking. It's not a huge deal, but um, those two are not at all like TCU in any way. I mean, the only thing that is similar is that they have played in national championship games, but and lately, to be fair, lately only really good programs have played. Well, only really good teams have played in the NFL. TCU had a pretty good team. They just were not within 55 points of the Dogs. They were not within 50 points of this Georgia team. I mean, that's really saying something. I that night, um, you know, I don't. So I told the story some. I don't know how quick I knew that game was over, but it was as soon as Georgia scored 17 points, I was like, TCU can't beat these guys. And I didn't think they could beat them to begin with. Let's just be clear. Go back and watch the videos. But um, it was um, it was pretty evident pretty quick. The only thing that prevented that from being just a total sloppy blowout from the get go was that long pass. So I was like, well, maybe TCU's kind of going to hang in here because their first drive was bad. And, Georgia just jumped on top of them after that. So scoring on the second drive, I was like, oh, we almost never see that. When you score on Georgia, often it's on the first drive, not the second or third. So they hit a ball and, they scored a touchdown. I thought they were not going to score a touchdown even then. They were so outmatched. It just was not even in the same ballpark. So to hear an NFL coach who clearly knows more about football than anybody watching this or talking right now has ever, I mean, he's forgotten stuff that way more stuff than we know. To hear somebody say that, it's like, bro, you being serious right now? Like, he was just being hyperbolic, right? It's some hyperbole slipping out. But I thought, you know, we're gonna see how this continues in terms of, you know, will TCU go on to be a competitive program year in and year out? Because there's nothing written in stone saying they can't be. I mean, they're playing in the Big 12. They are a program that has, um, been pretty good for a while. Now, they went sideways for a little bit. They've been pretty good for a while just as a program. They're just not at the level of Georgia and Alabama, which is what we can say about most of college football.